The night was quiet, yet inside Daniel's heart there was a storm no one else could hear. He sat alone in his small apartment, the dim light of a flickering lamp falling across the scattered bills on his table. Each envelope seemed heavier than paper. It carried the weight of his failures, his fears, and the voices of those who had told him he would never make it. Daniel was not a man who lacked effort. He worked long hours at a factory, taking on overtime whenever it was offered. Yet, it seemed as if life was always one step ahead of him, knocking him down just as he managed to stand. He remembered the words of his late father, who used to say, "Son, the fight for your future will be the hardest one you'll ever face. But it will also be the most rewarding." Those words used to inspire him, but tonight, with rent overdue and his dreams slipping away, they felt like a distant echo. As he sat there, weary and restless, Daniel's eyes landed on a framed photo of his younger sister, Emily. She was only 16, with big dreams of becoming a doctor. Their mother had passed away years ago, and Daniel had taken it upon himself to provide for her. He remembered the promise he had whispered at their mother's bedside, "I'll take care of her. I'll make sure she has a better life than I ever did." That promise was the only reason he kept going. But tonight, despair was winning. For the first time, Daniel wondered if he had been foolish to believe he could fight against the odds. Maybe the world was too harsh. Maybe the future wasn't his to shape. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Startled, he opened it to find his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, standing there with a warm smile and a small plate of food. She often checked on him, offering kindness in simple ways. "Daniel," she said softly, "I made a little extra tonight. Thought you might need it." Tears pricked his eyes, though he tried to hide them. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it." She studied him carefully, as though she could see right into his weary soul. "You look tired, son. Don't let life convince you that this is the end. Sometimes the fight gets hardest right before the breakthrough." Her words struck him deeply. They reminded him of something he once heard Joel Osteen say on the radio, "When you're tempted to give up, that's when you're closest to victory." The enemy fights hardest when he knows your future is great. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, replaying her words, replaying his father's voice, and thinking about Emily's dreams. Slowly, he realized that giving up wasn't an option. He had to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for her, and for the promise he had made. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a strange new determination. He went to work at the factory as usual, but instead of dragging his feet, he worked with renewed energy. His coworkers noticed. "What's gotten into you?" one asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Just remembering that the future doesn't come to you, you've got to fight for it." But life wasn't about to hand him an easy win. A week later, the factory announced massive layoffs due to financial struggles. Daniel was one of the first to lose his job. For a moment, it felt like the final blow. But something inside him had shifted. Instead of collapsing into despair, he remembered what Mrs. Johnson had said. The fight gets hardest right before the breakthrough. That evening, he sat at his table again, but this time instead of staring at bills, he pulled out a notebook and began writing down his skills, his strengths, and the ideas he had once abandoned. He remembered his passion for fixing things, cars, machines, anything mechanical. It was something he had loved since childhood but had never pursued seriously. What if this layoff wasn't the end? What if it was the push he needed to finally step into his calling? Over the next few weeks, Daniel worked odd jobs to keep food on the table, all while saving whatever he could to start a small repair business. It wasn't much at first, just him, a few tools, and an old garage he rented cheap. But with every tire he fixed, every engine he repaired, he felt a sense of purpose returning. Word spread in the neighborhood about the hard-working young man who would treat your car like it was his own. Customers admired not just his skill, but his kindness. Many noticed how he refused to overcharge people, even when he desperately needed the money. One evening, as Daniel was closing up the garage, Emily walked in carrying her schoolbooks. "You're really doing it," she said with a proud smile. "You didn't give up." Daniel looked at her, his heart swelling. "I'm doing it for us. But mostly for you. You deserve a future worth fighting for." Her eyes shone with tears. "Then I'll fight too, Daniel. I'll work hard in school, I'll chase my dreams, and I won't give up either. Because if you can rise after everything you've been through, then so can I." At that moment, Daniel realized something powerful. The fight for your future isn't just about you. It's about the people who believe in you, the ones who are watching, the ones whose lives are tied to your courage. And as the night fell around them, Daniel felt hope stirring like a flame in his chest. He knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in years, he believed that the future was his to claim. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, Daniel's small repair shop began to find its rhythm. What started as a survival strategy was beginning to resemble something more, a future he had never dared to imagine. Still, the road was anything but smooth. One chilly morning, Daniel arrived at the garage to find the lock broken and his tools stolen. For a man who had invested everything he had into that business, it was devastating. He sat on the curb, head in his hands, wondering if life was playing another cruel trick on him. Emily found him there later that afternoon. She put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, we'll figure it out." He wanted to be strong for her, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. "I'm tired, Em. Every time I get a little ahead, something drags me back down. Maybe I'm just not meant to win." Her voice cracked, but her conviction was steady. "No, you don't get to say that. You told me the fight for our future isn't over. You can't give up now, not after you've come this far." Daniel looked at his sister, realizing that the strength he thought he had lost was now reflected in her. He had planted seeds of hope in her heart, and now she was giving them back to him. The very next day, Mrs. Johnson knocked on his door again. This time she wasn't holding food, she was holding a small envelope. "I heard what happened, Daniel. The neighborhood's been talking. People see how much you care, how honest you are. We all want to help." Inside the envelope was a collection of bills and coins, donations from neighbors, coworkers, even strangers who had heard about his situation. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy back some tools and keep the garage open. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "Why would they do this?" Mrs. Johnson smiled warmly. "Because kindness has a way of coming back to you. You've been planting it with every act of honesty, with every time you put someone else before yourself. Now the harvest is here." For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of the world alone. He realized that the fight for the future isn't only won through personal strength, it's fueled by community, by the unseen hands that lift you when you fall. With renewed energy, he poured himself into the work again. His little garage became more than a repair shop, it became a place where people felt respected, where trust was valued more than money. Soon, a local business owner noticed his dedication and offered him a partnership. Daniel hesitated at first, afraid of taking too big a leap, but then he remembered the words that had carried him through the darkest nights: "The fight gets hardest before the breakthrough." He accepted. The partnership changed everything. With better equipment, more visibility, and steady customers, Daniel's business began to thrive. But the real victory wasn't in the money he earned, it was in the lives he touched. He made a point to hire young people from the neighborhood who struggled to find work, giving them not just jobs but mentorship. One young man, Marcus, reminded him of himself years ago, tired, beaten down, on the edge of giving up. Daniel took him under his wing, teaching him not only how to fix engines, but how to believe in his own future. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked one evening as they cleaned up the garage. Daniel smiled, wiping the grease from his hands. "Because someone once believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now it's my turn to do the same for you." As the months passed, Emily flourished in school. She was accepted into a program for aspiring medical students, and Daniel's heart nearly burst with pride when she came home waving the acceptance letter. "Daniel," she cried, laughing through tears. "I got in. I'm really going to be a doctor someday." He pulled her into a hug, his voice breaking. "That's why I fought, Em. For this moment. For you." But just as life was beginning to settle into a rhythm of hope, an unexpected storm rolled in. Late one evening, as Daniel was driving home, a reckless driver ran a red light and crashed into his truck. The impact was brutal. Daniel woke up in the hospital, his body broken, his future suddenly uncertain once again. Doctors told him it would be months before he could walk properly, let alone work. All his progress, his business, his role as Emily's provider, his responsibility to the young men he was mentoring, seemed to crumble in an instant. Lying in that hospital bed, Daniel wrestled with despair like never before. He wondered why life kept knocking him down just when things were finally looking up. But then Emily came in, holding his hand tightly. Her eyes were fierce, filled with the same fire he had once given her. "Daniel," she whispered, "don't you dare give up now. You've taught me my whole life that the fight isn't over until we win. So, if you can't fight for yourself right now, then fight for me. Because I still need you. We all do." Her words broke something open inside him, not in defeat, but in surrender to a truth he had forgotten. The fight for the future is not won in moments of strength, but in moments when love refuses to let you quit. Daniel closed his eyes, tears rolling down his face, and whispered, "Then I'll keep fighting." And deep inside, he believed it.